guy said, if you work really hard, I'll teach you how to scrub dishes. I said, no, I want to learn how to cook. One thing that I'm so proud of FoodDudes is we really grew organically.
In one night, on a busy night, how many events do you have going on simultaneously?
The record is 28.
I recently went to a kid's birthday party, and you're standing there at a 4-year-old's
making ice
birthday.
cream cookie sandwiches. It's not about the money, and I still love to get up and go to events and make people smile with my food. My first partner, we used to love to go and gamble, and he enjoyed it a bit more than I did. He got into some big trouble with gambling and ended up using all of our tax money and gambled it away.
Oh. Welcome back to the Rise Podcast, life stories of accomplished individuals. The premise of this podcast is to provide value to the audience by exploring and understanding the life path and challenges of the guests. Today, we have a very good friend of mine, Adrian Niman. Adrian, hello.
Hello.
How's it going, man?
Good, my brother.
It's weird because you and I are buddies, but when you put mics in front of people and cameras on them, shit gets weird, right? Let's try to make it not weird.
Sounds good to me.
It's funny because my kid is in your house probably just as often as he is in my house.
Right.
You're like his second dad. So thank you for taking that on. I appreciate that.
Honestly, I love cooking for Benny because my son is very particular about what he'll eat, where Benny is always willing to try something new. And he's like, this is the best cheeseburger I ever had. This is the best pasta I ever had. And getting compliments from an 8-year-old kid is more important to me than getting compliments from a world-renowned chef. Personally.
Look, you know what? If you're that enthusiastic about it, I have 2 more, right?
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I got to start amping up my game.
Okay, so let's chat about Adrian, and let me provide some background here. So Adrian started FoodDudes back in 2007 at the age of 22. From what I understand, from his parents' condo in Midtown Toronto.
Correct, Yonge and St. Clair. The mean streets.
So you started a catering company at the age of 22. You're 38 now.
Correct.
Okay. So you've been doing this for 16 years. And in 16 years, FoodDudes is currently a $40 million empire. You employ 300 people now in 2 countries, and you primarily do private catered events of all sizes throughout Toronto and now Miami.
Right.
And if I understand this correctly, you also own 5 restaurants in Toronto.
We're up to 8 different concepts now in Toronto.
Right. So you got to update your website.
Yeah, we do.
So the restaurants are Sarah, Rasa, did I pronounce it correctly? Clay, Pantry, Blondies, and what are the other 3?
So the other 3 I'm personally invested in, so they're not part of the FoodDudes umbrella per se. So there's Mimi Chinese with my partners at Harlow and David Schwartz, and we opened up a sister restaurant to that called Sunny's in Kensington Market, where Cold Tea used to be, and we have a 3rd one on the way, which we'll be announcing soon. We're pretty excited about it.
Okay. Wow. You apprenticed, if I'm not mistaken, at North 44.
Correct.
Okay, and for those of you who are from Toronto, North 44 is an institution. North 44 is a fine dining institution that has been around ever since I can remember, and I'm 50 years old, so
right. It's
been there forever. I'm assuming you worked with Mark McEwen.
Yeah, so I trained under Mark. It actually shut down, I think, 2 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. I think Biblos opened a secondary location, and Mark only kept at that point by Mark and one. So yeah, as a 16-year-old kid, I had to fight and claw my way to get that apprenticeship. They initially had put me at one at this diner at Mount Pleasant and Eglinton, and the guy said, if you work really hard, I'll teach you how to scrub dishes and be like a busboy. And I said, no, I want to learn how to cook. So I literally had to go to North 44, and Richard Andino was the head chef at the time, and basically beg him to give me an apprenticeship, as they had already picked one of my other colleagues or students to get it.
So sorry, but there's a position below washing dishes? They said they were going to graduate you to being a dishwasher? Yeah. What the hell do you do below washing dishes?
I have no idea, but it was a petrifying interview, and I said to myself, this is not what I want to do or what I had planned to want to sign up for.
Did Mark interview you?
No, by that point, Mark was already pretty well established, one of like the golden boy chefs in the city, and he was focused on opening up his next venture, which was by Mark, opening up in the financial core, which has gone on to be a very celebrated restaurant. Yeah,
I remember that place. I remember that. Now, I also read that you trained under a Michelin star, Mark Foch in Mallorca.
Yeah.
In Mallorca, in Spain.
Correct. So my friend, Chef Rob Braganolo, shout out to Rob, he actually got me the job in Mallorca because he's Canadian born, but he lived in Spain and worked at this Michelin star hotel called Reed's for the chef named Mark Foch. And he was honestly like, that experience really taught me not how to be a chef. That experience taught me everything outside of the kitchen. So I was a busboy there. I would have to take the luggages to people's rooms. I learned how to bartend. I learned how to serve. I learned how to manage in the morning shifts, and really get to learn the other areas of hospitality, where at that point in my career I felt was necessary to being a well-rounded restaurateur or entrepreneur in hospitality.
And how old were you there?
That was later first year university, so I would have been 22 years old.
So this was right before you started your own?
Yeah, correct.
So you left Mallorca, you came back. How long were you there for?
I was in Mallorca for 6 months.
Okay, and then you came back, and then you started the catering company out of your parents' place.
Literally, I was like saying to myself, I was offered so I was actually getting a degree at the University of Guelph in hospitality and tourism. That was after first year. So I guess I was actually 21, not 22.
Did you end up getting that degree?
I did get the degree, I finished, but I realized while I was in Spain and I was working in 40-degree weather and they offered me a job to stay on, they were going to give me like a €2 raise an hour or something like that.
a €2 raise an hour?
Yeah, correct.
It's like an extra 80 euro a week?
Yeah, honestly, I'd make €60 to work a 15-hour shift, and like it would get so hot in Spain in the summertime that like I just said to myself, like I have the smarts and the know-how from working at North 44 for 3 years, and then after that experience to start my own thing. And the guy I went there with was my first business partner on FoodDudes. And we actually decided while we were there that we're going to come home and start this catering business together.
Dude, that's wild. Okay, but there's more, because you're a very humble guy, and because I know you personally, I know you're a humble guy, but your humbleness extends to the internet, because getting information on you is like pulling teeth. So I've gone and done it. My people have gone and done it. And I personally know from some of the conversations that we've had that there's more stuff than what I'm seeing. So, I mean, you're humble either because that's just your nature, or maybe it's by design you're trying to keep something hidden, but there's a lot more. There is the one big celebrity who you work for, who we won't say who he or she is, but it is a big celebrity, and you do that. We'll get into that story a little bit later without obviously talking about who they are, but let's kind of go back, because again, the purpose of this podcast is to really understand kind of the genesis of success and understand how people can get started. Because, today the question that I get asked, and I get a lot of people reaching out to me on DM, whether it's, people who follow me, a lot of people who follow Valeria. And the question that comes up is like, how do you get started? How do you get started when you're 20 years old, or when you're 25 years old? What's the next step? And I feel that's the most difficult step. So let's kind of go back to the beginning. Tell me where you grew up.
I grew up in Toronto, born and raised. My mom was from England and immigrated to Canada when she was 10 years old, and went to boarding school at Havergale, which is a prominent female-only school in around Avenue in Lawrence. Mm-hmm. And my father was born in Toronto, and his family is from Eastern Europe. Yeah, that's basically how. So
your dad was born in Toronto as well.
Correct.
Oh, in Toronto. Your mom was born in
England, and then
UK.
yeah, and then. So yeah, I have an older brother who was from a previous marriage of my father's, and then my brother and I were from my mom, and that's basically how it all started. It's not how it ended, but that's how it started.
Okay.
Yeah.
Would you say, like, in terms of, let me turn that off. Hold on. In terms of kind of growing up, did you grow up in, like, was it a middle class home, upper middle class, lower middle class?
I would say it's actually a good question. I would say it was probably around middle class. My mom was extremely hardworking in the travel industry, and my dad was a family law lawyer. At the time, he was a pretty standard family law lawyer. And as we got older, he probably became one of the best family law lawyers in the country. And, you know, what I learned from both of them was, and they weren't home a lot because they had to work very hard to provide for me and my brothers. So we did have nannies around the house a lot. But what I really admired was their work ethic and how hard they worked. And then even after a long day, that they would spend quality time with their kids. And my dad would shoot pucks with me against the garage and coach me in baseball and hockey. And that's something that I admired that I obviously want to pass on to my children as well.
Do you feel that, I mean, what you ended up doing for a living, both, I mean, being an entrepreneur and being a chef, and in the food industry, like you really went deep into what you're doing. Like it's a very far cry from what either of them do. Did they have, when you were growing up, did they have this expectation like, hey, you know, you gotta follow in my footsteps, you gotta be a lawyer? Or did they want you to be like I find everybody's dad wants them to be a dentist. I don't know why. Everybody I talk to, every like guy who's been on this podcast with me, every one of them, their dad wants them to be a dentist. But what were those conversations like when you were younger?
It's actually like really interesting. So I'm in the middle of actually writing a book, somewhat of a biography, but autobiography, but also something that will kind of tell the whole story of FoodDudes. And one of the chapters is My Son the Cook. Because even to this day, my dad will introduce me to people as a cook, you know, like, and I don't think he'll ever really understand. And maybe he does. He hasn't, mentioned it to me that, you know, what it is that I've built or accomplished. He'll always kind of look at me as a cook.
Sorry to interrupt you. He hasn't acknowledged?
I think in some ways he will, but I think, you know, the plan all along for me was to become a hockey player. I came out of North Toronto.
Sorry. That was, so when you throw these bombs, I gotta kind of like, I gotta be a little rude and interrupt you. So
yeah.
Hold on a second. Whose plan was it for you to become a hockey player? Yours or your dad's?
I think the family plan, including mine, was because I got off to such a hot start and everybody was saying, oh, this kid's the next big thing, that I was going to be a hockey player. And then I didn't hit my growth spurt at the right time, and there was just a lot of kids that were better than me. My friend Brandon actually said something when we were out for dinner the other week. He said, before social media existed, you wouldn't know if there was this incredible hockey player that's better than you in Russia or New Brunswick or, you know, Kelowna, BC, because we didn't have access to that. Where now you're kind of more humbled, right? So it really and there's just a whole world of people out there. And as Europeans started to enter the NHL, it became very hard for Canadians, Americans to get to that next level. And to be honest, I just wasn't good enough. But failing that,
how old were you at this time?
I was probably when I realized I wasn't going to make it, I was probably 16, 17 years old.
So, I mean, pretty early on, you were already thinking about what you're going to be doing, like professionally, like how you're going to be building your life.
Yeah.
Like at 16, I was on my skateboard in the park. Like I wasn't thinking about, I'm going to be a professional hockey player. You were already winding down your professional hockey career at the age of 16, whereas I was out, you know, skateboarding with my buddies.
Yeah, so it's actually funny you say that. So I did then hit my growth spurt, and when I started working at North 44, I was 16, and I just did it because I was really passionate about cooking and watching cooking shows like Emerald or The Urban Peasant. But then what happened was I did hit my growth spurt. I ended up being the captain of my high school team, and I got drafted by the Sudbury Wolves as an overager, and then decided to go to the University of Guelph. It was a double cohort year.
Did you get like a scholarship or a hockey scholarship?
Well, so it's interesting. So it was a double cohort year. So that was where the grade 12s and grade 13s. I was the last OAC year. So 2 grades were going to university.
OAC is grade 13 for those who don't know, in Canada. Yeah.
Correct. So it was very hard to get into university that year. And if it wasn't for my hockey capabilities, Guelph would have never picked me because I think my average was only 78 or something like that, and it had to be around 84 to be able to be accepted.
So, okay, when you were growing up and you were as career-minded as you were and you were always thinking about what the next step is, was it a conflict for you? Because I'm sure you, as all of us, had friends, had buddies who didn't have to worry about it. So they weren't thinking about that. They were thinking about maybe catching the next party or whatever it is that they were doing. You're thinking about something else. So was it a distraction for you to have these guys around you?
You know what? I think that there was some friends that I had friends that came from money that lacked motivation to want to figure out something on their own. And I think what really inspired me and which also made me feel proud of my friends who did come from money, who were still very entrepreneurial, trying to figure out their own path, even if they started life on third base.
It kind of goes either way, right? And what I notice with kids from wealthy families is that you'll have a guy who's a guy or a girl, but you'll have a person who sees their parents grinding it out and they're successful and they're wealthy by whatever means, whether they're entrepreneurs or professionals, and they're following suit, and they're like, shit, I got to step up, because when that break comes, when they stop supporting me, if I want to keep this standard of living and more, I got to do a lot more. But then you've got that other cohort of people who are just like, shit, I'm just going to wait for my parents to die, basically. Because, so how did you go one way and not the other?
I think
not that you had all that support, but sorry, really the question is like, did those guys distract you? Like, was it distracting for you to hang out with these guys?
Not really. If anything, the distractions were like the kids that were trying to like get me to do drugs, or or to get into fights after school, and like all that nonsense we experienced in high school. Luckily, because of hockey, it kind of gave me the discipline to obviously like want to be in the arena and want to be working on becoming a better skater, a better shooter, and having that work ethic instilled for me from my parents really gave me the discipline to say, look, like, I'm going to be going to university. I got to figure out what I'm going to do with my life. I don't want to be a dentist. I don't want to be a lawyer. I don't want to be a doctor. I was never really book smart. So I realized that I had to use, my entrepreneurial skills and my social skills to make something of my life.
So why food? Like, why food? I mean, there was, again, very far cry from the atmosphere that you grew up in. Nobody in your family was doing, I'm assuming nobody in your family was doing this, right? Not even like uncles or cousins?
I didn't have a nonna that was like teaching me how to make like a wicked spaghetti and meatballs.
Right. So it wasn't like this like revelation one day when you had a bowl of pasta where you're like, okay, shit, this is what I'm gonna do for the rest of my life.
No, you know what?
So where did this come from?
I just think I naturally gravitated towards it. Like I said, like watching shows like Emerald or The Urban Peasant, these cooking shows, when I would be like flicking through the TV when I was sick at home with stomach flu, I would just find myself really like interested in watching cooking shows. And I love to eat. Since an early age, I just loved food, and my mom would take me on boat cruises, and they would pour the soup tableside, and like the way it went in the bowl with like the garnishes. I just found it so magical and something that really inspired me from a young age.
So it's not just about the food itself. I mean, it sounds to me like it's the whole experience of it. It's the presentation. It's everything about it.
Right. Like I always say, like, I think like the answers are right in front of us. I think the answers are right in front of us.
Yeah.
I think that if you really like pay attention to what's happening around you, the signs are there. And if you just explore the signs and explore those passions of things that make you excited is the most important thing.
So it's just paying attention to what it is that interests you.
Correct.
In your opinion, how important is it to love or to be passionate about what you go into?
I think it's everything. And I think we live in a world now where like people are becoming used to that quick fix, that quick buck, either between crypto or a social media post or an OnlyFans account. And people are seeing, hey, like I don't have to get a university degree or even work hard to make money. And I think that really puts us in a scary era, because the way we grew up, me and you, was you got to work hard, and if you keep working hard,
you're a very nice guy, but I'm significantly older than you. But please continue. On your thought.
I think like you have to work hard and continually working hard, and eventually the money will fall in your lap. And one thing that I just hope for the next generation, or for anyone that's struggling with their business day in and day out, is that if they keep grinding and if they keep working hard at it, eventually they will be successful. What won't make you successful is keep going from option A to option B to option C, and then you just find yourself spiraling out of control. You have to stick to something and really keep working at it and defining your craft, and that will make you successful.
That's a really good point. I heard a saying like, then the saying was like, the key to being successful in business is to stay in business.
Yeah.
Right? Meaning you keep iterating, and even if your growth, like there are certain times when growth will subside, growth can go backwards, but as long as you stay the course and you keep iterating and pivoting and doing what kind of needs to be done in a typical business, then you will eventually see that hockey stick growth, which is something that you experience. You also said something that was interesting about opportunities today in terms of, you've got crypto and you've got drop shipping and all these different kind of biz ops. And when you're a young person, and I hope there's young people listening to this, where you're on social media and you're being every day, you're being fed, oh, you got to today do this, to do that. So, and you're being pulled in all these different directions. I find it like almost like similar to what happened, what technology did to dating. Whereas if you kind of draw that parallel between finding your partner and finding your, I guess, vocation or finding your career, right? So when you're dating someone back in the day, like I met my wife before apps even existed, right? So it's like you meet someone and you're committed to that person. You don't have 35 other options kind of on the sidelines beeping on your phone, right? And it's the same thing with business. Like when you're committed to one business, for good or for bad, you're in it. You're not jumping around. So how important do you think it is to have that focus? Like, because in your business, I mean, you started with catering. And my premise as to why my theory as to why you started with catering is because it didn't require this like huge outlay of cash. It didn't require like signing a lease in a restaurant, like in a property or millions of dollars in renovations. You literally started from your kitchen, and then you eventually evolved into restaurants. And you're very modest. You're not talking about the nightclubs. I think there were more than one. Right. So you're not talking about that. But I can see the evolution as to when my guess is you started making money in catering. And then with that money in catering, you now had financial means to start other businesses, brick and mortar businesses. And you also probably had, you had your name, you had your brand that you had created in the local market in Toronto. And then you were able to kind of parlay that, potentially get funding. I don't know your story. And then you were able to kind of find these partners, and then you had the credibility to partner with people. Otherwise it wouldn't have taken you on. So you kind of cut your teeth and you proved yourself in catering. Was my speculation correct?
No, 100% correct. And I think that like the most important thing is like, you don't want to get into a lot of debt, off the bat.
Sure.
If you can build something by using your family and friends and your network to create some cash flow. And one thing that I'm so proud of FoodDudes is we really grew organically, like as organic as you can grow. We never had an initial investor. We never did outbound sales. We led with our product and our service and our passion and our mission statement. And by doing so, we kept growing and evolving and building something truly special. And a lot of times people open restaurants and they're like, oh shit, the margins in restaurants suck. So we're going to start doing catering, where we kind of flipped the script and did catering and then focused on doing projects that inspired us or that we were passionate about.
How'd you know? Like, how did you know not to go the wrong way from a cash flow perspective by investing into brick and mortar restaurants, and instead did catering, geniusly out of your parents' home where you had like zero overhead? You didn't even have like one of these, what they call a phantom kitchen or whatever. You didn't have any shit kitchen, like that. Yeah. Ghost kitchen.
So my mom gave me some great advice when I first started. She goes, Adrian, the key to business is bringing more money in than you give out.
It sounds kind of obvious, right?
It does, but until like you hear it, and then I had this black book that I carried around. So if Gary and Valeria hired me for an event, and it was $1,000 event, I would know, okay, my chef's going to cost me this, the labor is going to cost this, the food's going to cost this, and I would have this black book, and I would literally write it down event by event, and that's how I wanted to make sure that more money was always coming in than I was giving out. And I followed that to this day with all my businesses.
It's funny because you talk about stuff that's like, to you and me, it's obvious. Like, you're not going to take a job and let's say, it's a $10,000 job and spend $15,000 on it. So you clearly you have to do the math every single time. But to most people, it's not obvious, especially in this day and age where, people are, again, we go back to this, people are making money on crypto, or they're getting like, 50,000x on their investment. So kind of the fundamentals of what you did and what you continue to do, I think, is something that kind of paved the way. I want to get into a couple of more things here. One of the things that I noticed with your events, and I always know it's one of your events, first of all, because the food is really dope. And just to give some background, I remember when we were back in Toronto, it was for Valeria's birthday during COVID. I don't know if we're going to get busted for this to say that you sent the chef over during COVID, but you sent the chef over, and you and I hadn't met yet. This was like a few years ago. You and I only met recently, but So you sent a chef over, and it was in our studio.
Chef Derek.
Chef Derek, that's right.
Yeah.
You sent the chef over. It was in our studio in Toronto. We converted the condo that we used to live in into a studio for Valeria to film. And you sent the chef over, and you guys like put this crazy table, and you set the table, and it was so beautiful. And at that point, that was really, I had known about you because you were actually my client on my restaurant, like my hospitality directory back in like 2000. I started that thing.
Right.
You started yours in 2007. So around probably 2008, 2009, you were advertising with, and you and I had never met. Menu Palace. That's right. And you and I had never met. So it's funny because when you and I met here for the first time, that was when we kind of put all that together, saying, "Oh, you know what? Our companies did some work. You were my client and stuff." But my point is that first meal, I just saw and I'm not like, I don't mean to sound like I'm selling your stuff, because I'm not. I'm pointing out the difference between, successful entrepreneurs and failed and mediocre entrepreneurs is that you weren't even there, but everything went off so correctly. Mm-hmm. And I find that that's one of the skills that you've been able to acquire, where you have control over quality of food, quality of experience, quality of everything, without actually being present. So that was the first time I really felt like what you were doing, and I understood, because I had obviously heard your name many times, but I'd never experienced FoodDudes. Mm-hmm. But when I experienced it that first time, I was like, okay, this is why these guys are successful, right? This is why.
And I think that, I really appreciate the compliment. And I think like one of the reasons why, and I didn't realize this when I came up with the name, but if I had called the company Chef Adrian, right, you would have the expectation at that event that Chef Adrian would be there.
Correct.
But when you create a culture around a brand called FoodDudes, Chef Derek is a food dude. He happens to also be my business partner, involved in other projects together, and is the executive chef of FoodDudes as well. And when we saw Valeria's name on the schedule, we wanted to make sure we were giving you one of our best. But like, to be honest with you, the name FoodDudes, why we've been so successful is it is scalable, because it's more than Adrian Niman. Anyone can be a food dude. A lot of people that work for me are women, and they're proud to call themselves food dudes.
No, but everyone can't be a food dude, because if everyone could be a food, like you can't. I'm not a food dude, because if I'd burn hot dogs. But
if you had the passion to be a chef,
I understand. But I'm saying there's a certain level of quality you have to be a food dude.
Yeah, and we can teach you those systems, and it becomes more than needing. Like, people know me when I come to an event, and that excites them. But they're just as excited to have another food dude come, because our systems and what we've built and how we train our staff and the culture we've built is more than Adrian Niman. It's about being a food dude and about creating that culture. And I think that that's like a lot of people that create businesses, and like I look at your wife, like how successful she is, and how successful you guys are together and what you've built. And I think to myself, I'm like, Valeria's name is attached to this, right? So everything that is done, Valeria is going to have to be a part of.
Which makes it, which there's difficulty in that.
Yeah.
There is difficulty.
That's what I'm saying. And those are the people I look at, I'm like, wow, like, like I'm envious that they're able to do it and keep doing it day in and day out, especially on social media, because it's a grind.
But I'm envious the other way around.
Right.
I'm envious that you actually have a business that isn't attached to your personal brand. Mm-hmm. Although you are developing your personal brand, I see the content you're putting out.
Yeah.
A lot of it, I think some of it is because I kind of nagged you to do it.
It's all because of you, Gary. Let's be honest.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea for you to do, but there's definitely a benefit that it's not attached to you, and you can eventually sell this. You can eventually retire and have not a predecessor. What's the word I'm looking for?
Like a protege?
A protege.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe it'll be your son one day.
You know what? I think it'll be my daughter between the two. She seems to really be
That was a sexist comment I just made. That was wrong.
It wasn't. Honestly, it's just Cruz seems more interested in cooking than Shai does. And, ultimately, at the end of the day, I think hospitality is a really tough business to get into.
The toughest. I heard this is the toughest thing to do.
It is. Now, catering, I would say, is a bit different because you're in the events world and you can kind of control what you take and know what your margins are before you do an event, which is what really excites me about it. But I always tell everyone, I'm like, I don't live in Miami, or we don't have a home in Rosedale because of our restaurants. Catering is the bulk of why we've been so successful financially.
And that makes a lot of sense to me. But here's the interesting thing, and I mean, I still want to stay on the chronological trajectory of what you do, but I do want to point out a few things because I don't want to lose my thought. But I recently went to a kid's birthday party, and you were there. Like, you were there in your out, like, your, what's it, I don't even know what it's called, like
chef apron and jacket.
Yeah, you were there. You got, did you have a hat? I think you even had a hat on. Like, you were.
Of course.
Yeah, you're not playing, right? So you're there. You have a $40 million company with 300 employees, and you are standing at a 4-year-old's, whatever it was. It's our mutual friend now.
Right.
And you're standing there at a 4-year-old's
making ice cream cookie sandwiches.
Like, you were literally making ice cream cookie sandwiches.
Yeah.
And my son Benjamin was asking you if there's peanuts in it because he's allergic. So I guess, how does that work? Like, how does that work in your formula of success? Like, why are you still doing that?
I think it's a great question. And I also want to say that for me, the day that I stop wanting to go work with food and go to those events is probably the day that I would consider selling the company. I had a chef that we hired. He was a senior level chef, and he couldn't understand why Lindsay, my business partner, and I were still going to events and being as hands-on as we are. And the answer to it is simple. It's like, if we stop doing that, one, we won't be able to really see what's going on or pick out the deficiencies in our business.
But you can just show up. You don't have to actually be wearing the apron. Like, you can observe.
I feel that my staff, because I get in the trenches with them, respect us more for it. And if we're just standing there with a piece of paper and a pen taking notes,
I understand
that it makes us, be part of the team. And also, I love, at the end of the day, I love to cook. So if I'm going to go to an event, I am going to get my hands dirty, because if I can make the event better, which I feel that I can, given my know-how and how long I've done this, I'm going to continue to do so because it benefits the company and it benefits our customers' experience.
You also do. Yeah, absolutely. Look, absolutely. And I envy you for doing it. I'm having, to be totally transparent, I have a hard time with it because I've been doing this a long time. I've been in various businesses a long time. And unlike your business, which, you obviously, you stuck the course to get it to where it is, me being in the digital space, I'm kind of almost like what's a fly in the wind, or anyways, there's instability in what I do because certain digital trends come and go. And now I've hopped on this thing with Valeria. It's been a good run. It's coming up to 7 years. But I guess,
crazy
for you to continue to do this and to continue to be in the trenches and do what you do, I'm envious of it because it's hard for me to do. Although here I am hosting a podcast, and although I follow my wife around with a camera, that sounded wrong, but you know what I mean. So yeah, I guess I do it. I guess I'm trying to make myself feel better, saying I kind of do it too. The other thing that I think is absolute genius of you.
Let me just ask a quick question on that note. I just watched the Conor McGregor documentary on
I just watched
Netflix.
the first half hour of it too. Yeah.
Okay. So he did the Mayweather fight. He's probably worth he sold proper that whiskey brand.
Yeah.
He's got to be worth at least $500 million by now.
Something like that.
And he's about to get back in the ring and start fighting again.
It's not about the money for him anymore.
Well, correct. So if it's not about the money and you truly love what you do, then it's kind of from my experience on a much more micro level, I would say that, for me, it's not about the money. And at this point, I still love to get up and go to events and make people smile with my food. And I think the minute I stop enjoying doing that is probably the minute that I'll probably want to walk away.
It's interesting because you're not just doing it for the business. You came to my house not too long ago. You know what? I'm such a good host. I invite you over and basically you do all of the cooking and you take care of everything.
No, we should have been filming that because we had to go to 4 different stores just to find hamburger buns.
This is true. That was funny, but we didn't give up, and it was raining and it was crazy. But we came home and you made this gourmet like Big Mac sauce that you made out of literally nothing in my fridge. I don't know how you did it, but it was like the most delicious thing ever. So you obviously, and I could see how much you enjoy it. You were running around my kitchen, just you were beaming. So I think it's great. I want to know in general, like people would want to know is how do you get this level of enthusiasm in what you do? It sounds to you like this is it a gift, or do you sometimes have to work at it? Like, do you sometimes get demotivated by certain shit that goes on in your life and the business? And how do you, like, I feel that you in the kitchen, that's your center. Because when I observe you, that's like your North Star. It's your center. It feels like it's your happy place. Like, I see you more, like you're in general, like you're a happy dude, but I feel most happiest when you're in that kitchen.
Yeah.
So do you ever stray from that and need to get back in?
I think, when you build a large business, part of what, potentially demotivates me, depending on the day, is dealing with human beings.
Right.
And I think dealing with their emotions, their feelings, and inspiring them and correcting them when they do something which isn't to our standards, is a very difficult, demotivating thing for me. But, I do have a client where I'm able to go work for them. It's just me. I don't have to delegate to anyone. It's just me cooking and making food for someone.
Just the client that I know about.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think, like, for me, it's like that's what's most exciting is like when I do those shifts, I'm literally just cooking for them. I don't have to delegate to one of my staff. I don't need to correct them if they do something wrong. And to me, it's like I truly love cooking for people. And when you have a gift like that, it's something that you should constantly explore. And it doesn't have to be cooking. It could be being a life coach. It could be a yoga instructor, a personal trainer, a surfing instructor. Like, it's endless what it could be. But if you really enjoy something and you look at perfecting your craft and sharing that with somebody else, there's really nothing better than that.
So when you talk about your craft, I mean, there's something that I want to address where your craft is it's not only being a chef. Being a chef in itself is a big thing, especially being a chef at your level. Because I don't think people understand who are listening to this podcast who actually haven't been served by you directly. Yeah. They don't understand the level of chef that you are. But in addition to that, and again, that's most of the time, that's all that people do. And when I say all, like, that is a big thing to be a chef. But in addition to that, you are a business owner with hundreds of employees and tens of millions of dollars in revenue. So it's hard. Like, let me give you some more context.
Please.
Okay. There was this movie, with David Duchovny.
Okay.
Years ago. And he played a role where he was he was a surgeon.
Okay.
And he got kicked out of being a surgeon. He lost his license, and he wasn't able to be a surgeon. And the whole movie is that eventually the mafia hired him to be a surgeon, and it was like this whole. It was a really cool movie. I don't remember what it's called. And I remember this one scene when somebody asked him, like, what was it like being a surgeon? What was it like losing your license? And he made a statement that kind of stuck with me. And he said something along the lines of, being a surgeon and operating on someone is like being a fighter jet pilot when you're both the pilot and the plane. And I don't know if you kind of get that feeling when you're cooking where everything is just coming together. I don't know where I'm going with this, but the way you talk about being a chef, it reminds me of that scene in the movie where someone is so passionate about something. But I get sorry, that was a little out of context, but I want to come back to where, the question coming back to the whole, real world here, without me going on my tangents. But I guess my question to you is, that discipline of being a chef is so intricate and involved. How the hell are you able to scale a business and be in, like, you sometimes got, like, how many events a night? Like, in one night, on a busy night, how many events do you have going on simultaneously?
The record is 28.
How do you do that? That's just insanity. Because look, there's two parts of your brain that I feel are being engaged here, right? There's like the artistic side, because you have to be an artist to be a chef. But then, you're this business owner who is highly systems based, highly administrative, highly organized. How do you reconcile those two?
I think for me, I realize as good of a chef as I am, and I think that I've constantly become better and better as a chef, just like a surgeon or a lawyer. The more you practice your craft, the better you become at it. But I truly believe I'm a better businessman than I am a chef.
Where did that come from? The chef, I understand. That was a passion.
Yeah.
That was a passion. That was like, you're a teenager, you're apprenticing, you love it. You told that story. I understand that story. And you're blessed because most people don't have that. Mm-hmm. Like they don't. You're one of the blessed people. Valeria is one of the blessed people because she found,
Right.
content creation and what she was good at. That's great. But where this business, that's a whole other discipline. Mm-hmm. So how do you do them both?
It's actually, I wish I could explain it in words. I mean, I think for me, I have an entrepreneurial spirit. And one thing about me is I'm willing to recognize the things that I'm not good at and then go out and find those things to make my business better. So I realized I would never be the best office administrator or accountant.
So you have people for that.
Correct. And I've made so many mistakes,
Sure.
Gary, along the way. But one thing about me is like when I make mistakes, I learn from them and then I fix them. And I don't get caught up on being like, oh, like I made this big mistake. I don't let my ego get involved. I realize when I fuck up and I go out and I fix the issue and I learn from it. And I think that like there is no like, unless you're, go to school and get 95% in all your grades, would that make you a good businessman? Not necessarily,
No.
right? So I think that it just takes a certain type of personality or entrepreneurial spirit to have the know-how on to how to build a business and then what to look for. And for me, that was a really important thing, is realizing my weaknesses and then surrounding that with people that are better and strong in those areas that I'm weakest at.
Yeah, but you still need to oversee it. You still need to have your head in the P&L. You still need to like know everything that's going on. It's like that little book that you have, before each event when you're pricing everything out to make sure that there's going to be a sufficient amount of margin in this project. Mm-hmm. You have to be doing that at scale. I mean, we have a 3-person finance team, and I'm on the calls with them, and I, to be honest, it's what I like the least, and I feel bad for that team because they're like the team I'm the least responsive to. But how do you? To me, I don't get it. I don't know how you're able to be such an artist in one, like literally in the same like minute. You're an artist, and then you're putting out administrative fires with your team. Like I've seen you do it. I've seen you take calls in the middle of being a chef. So I've literally seen you do this shit. Mm-hmm. So I guess what I'm trying to get out of you is people who are one or the other. How do they succeed? Like, how do you succeed if you can't do this? Because this is hard what you do.
It's literally taken me, this is my 16th year doing it. So you can't be scared to make mistakes. It's not like I was great at it from day one. I'm not even sure I'm great at it now. I mean, clearly.
You and me both.
Right? So like, I literally think that at the end of the day, if you inspire people and you're passionate, and at the end of the day, you allow people to be creative and don't stunt their creativity is the biggest thing. And that means that they're going to make mistakes, and that's going to fall on you, right? I've realized this and learned this the hard way. They're going to make a ton of mistakes, and at the end of the day, it's going to fall on the leader or the owner of the business. But if you keep working at it and allow people to make mistakes and keep hiring good people around you, like good-hearted people is like the most important thing for us at FoodDudes.
I agree.
And like if you build that culture, eventually you will become successful. But for the first 7 years of FoodDudes, we weren't making money. Like
really,
we were like getting by, but we weren't making money.
So that's I've actually been waiting to ask this question, because I'll tell you what it is with this interview is that I get so excited and I'm going straight to the exciting part of what you've got going on today.
Yeah.
That I feel I'm missing the point of this podcast, where I'm trying to understand that come up, right? So if I go back, so to your point about not making money, that's really interesting. So how did you get the money in the first place? Mm-hmm. You're 22 years old. Like, where'd you get this cash from?
I actually, and this is actually, I don't mind telling this story because I think it's important about picking your partners wisely. But
You had a rich partner.
no, I did not actually. But he was my best friend, and I don't recommend going into business with your best friends first and foremost. I think separating the two is important.
How about going into business with your wife?
I'm not even going there. But ultimately, we started cooking for family and friends. My aunt needed a birthday party. I did my mom's, an event for my mom and her friends. She got me some jobs at her work. My dad's law firm hired us for a weekly Friday event. Another lawyer hired us for a daily thing. We got a boat cruise contract. So we were getting these small gigs, and we were doing it all out of my mom's kitchen. So we had no overhead, and we weren't paying ourselves salaries. In fact, like if we did an event for $3,000, we would cash the check the next day and then go drinking at the bar that night. And that's how we went week after week. Like we weren't saving the money, which obviously when you grow a business, that's what you should.
So there was some profit. You just drank it.
I would say I probably drank it all. But
so when you say you didn't make any money, you made money, you just spent it.
Well, the one thing I knew from very early on, and I remember this at university, is putting the tax money aside. Like when I charge you HST, that's not my money. Yeah. So, I mean, there's deductions and stuff like that. But so I put that money in a savings account. And I would say after the first year, we built that up to $30,000, knowing that we were going to owe around that in taxes that next year. So I realized that pretty early on. I didn't save any corporate tax money or pay myself a salary correctly. I probably did everything wrong that an entrepreneur should do when an entrepreneur should do when starting a business. But my first partner, had we used to love to go and gamble, and he enjoyed it a bit more than I did. And
what was your game? Blackjack?
My game was blackjack or poker, primarily poker, and his game was blackjack. Mm-hmm. And a long story short, he didn't tell me this, but he got into some big trouble with gambling and ended up using all of our tax money and gambled it away. Oh. Yeah, So
how did he get access to the account? You guys had both signing authority in the bank?
He ran part of the job was that I was like to be in charge of the chef and dealing with the clients, and he was supposed to be in charge of the business and the bank account. And he came clean to me about it, that he had drained the whole savings account, like $30,000 of tax. And that was the only time to date.
How old were you at this time?
I was probably 24.
That's a tough pill to swallow, man. When you're that young and that's tough.
So I went to my dad, and he lent me the money to pay the government, and I had to pay him back, which I did. And my previous business partner, obviously after that, we dissolved our partnership, but he paid back the money as well.
He did pay it back.
Which I commend him for, and I wish him all the best. I think that everything happens for a reason. But why I'm mentioning this is that really put me in a position where I was about to shut down the business. I'm I got burned by my best friend and my business partner, and I have no money in the bank account, and I'm grinding every day to just, to do what? I have nothing to show for it. And it was a pivotal moment for me to kind of wake up one day and say, you know what, fuck this. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to prove everyone wrong. And I'm going to build a successful business. And I kind of never looked back after that.
So you used that negative experience to motivate you.
Correct. And the fact that there was no money in the bank account. You look at your bank account and you're just like, okay, well, this isn't good. And sure enough, it wasn't easy after that, though. And there was a lot of bumps and bruises along the way. But, I know it sounds cliche to say, but if anyone's listening to this, you have to stick to something.
When you say, I'm assuming somebody will listen to this.
I hope so. Yeah, lots of people. But those that are listening, that are thinking about starting a business, you got to stay committed to it, and you have to keep working at it. It took me 7 years before we were truly profitable in our business.
Did you ever in those 7 years think I'm throwing it in, I'm throwing in the towel. I can't keep doing this. I can't keep working for free. I'm going to go get a job.
Yeah, I think I met Alexandra during that time, and
just for context, Alexandra is your wife.
Yeah, correct. Yes. So, and
sorry, you met her at that time?
I met her at Bloke and Forth, where we were renting a kitchen. It was the third kitchen we were renting.
Oh, Bloke and Forth was in your place?
It was, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was a partner there.
Okay.
But I was.
This is a nightclub.
A nightclub, but why it was great for us is it was M Burger previously from Montreal, a burger joint from Montreal, and they had dumped $1.6 million into the kitchen there.
Okay.
So we had a beautiful kitchen. They were kicked out. Unfortunately, something happened with the landlord, but fortunately for us, we got access to all that amazing kitchen equipment, and we were building the business. At that point, it was growing pretty rapidly. At that point, we started getting some venues and some more corporate work and weddings. And, you know, Alex and I ended up obviously having Shy, our firstborn. And at that point, you know, we were opening our first restaurant, Rasa, and that was probably a really tough, challenging point for me mentally. I had never felt like mentally tired or drained until that point where like my temper started getting bad. Like I was angry at my employees. I didn't really recognize the man that I was looking at in the mirror. And, you know, my business partner, Lindsay, took me out for lunch and she was like, what's going on? You know, and, you know, why are we doing this if this is how it's going to be? And it was kind of a big wake up call for me. And, you know, we calmed down, we reassessed what we wanted with FoodDudes and what we wanted to build. And then from there, you know, the business kept growing and my family kept growing, and we never kind of looked back after that point.
Okay. I was going to ask you if I have it written down to ask you if you ever thought of giving up and how did you push through, but you just answered that question.
Yeah.
Let me see what else I got here. Hold on a sec. What was like a pivotal moment? Like what was like a breakthrough moment? Like how many years into the business did something kind of happen where you're like, holy shit, like this is scaling. This is real. This is like, this is going to make me a wealthy person. Like at what point did that happen?
So we have like a map of Toronto of like the way the catering industry works is there's X amount of venues and then there's hotels. So the hotels we don't have access to. They do it all in-house. But then there's...
there is a hotel in Toronto that you...
Correct.
You're always there, so I'm assuming you have some kind of business there. You're not just hanging out in the lobby, right? What's that hotel?
Hotel X.
Okay, so what do you do at Hotel X?
We're the food and beverage partner at Hotel X with our partners Harlow. But before
So you were saying about the question I had asked you and then rudely derailed you from was, what was that pivotal moment? I just wanted to point out that, you know, you're such a humble dude, and I think that this is something you need to work on. Like you just like, oh, Hotel X, it's this huge hotel in Toronto for those who don't know, and you run all the food and beverage in a huge hotel with hundreds of rooms. So again, you're a humble guy. But let's get back to the story. Tell us with the pivotal moment, the jump off.
So the way the catering business is kind of defined is by being on all these venues and being a caterer on their exclusive catering lists at these venues. And what we started to find was that, you know, we were trying everything we could to get into these venues and they weren't hearing us. It literally took the people of Toronto and our clients to keep saying, do you have FoodDudes on your list? Do you have FoodDudes on your list? Do you have FoodDudes on the list? Where they had no choice but to break down the barrier and let us in. And it got to a point where we literally were on every single venue in Toronto that was accepting an outside caterer. And I remember one weekend we had 23 events on a Saturday.
Wow.
And I pulled my whole team outside. We have a picture of us all. I said, this is a historic day for the company. I did like an Al Pacino Any Given Sunday speech and got everybody like really excited and riled up. And you know, it was at that point that I realized, like, when it comes to catering, there's no limit to what you can do. If you have a 100-seat restaurant in Toronto, you know, even if you flip it 2 times, you're going to get 300 people as a max for that night.
Yeah, you're capped.
You're capped. In catering, there's no cap. And at that point, we started to get events like Tim Hortons did a 3,000-person event with us at Music, which was a nightclub back in the day in Toronto.
I remember Music from my single days.
You seem like a music guy to me.
No, I'm not a music guy. I was there a couple of times. I know who the guys you're talking about, and I'm not one of them. But I was there a handful of times.
I should say I didn't get paid for that event, but that's another story for another day. But at the end of the day, we started to get
Tim Hortons didn't pay you?
Tim Hortons paid the provider, and eventually we got paid, but it's, you know, it was a really interesting story. But,
so that was the jump off when you're on all these venues. But was there a financial trend that you, as a result of that you saw? I was like, holy shit, like every month it's like millions, like. Yeah.
So once we started to see the revenue spike, and I want to say around 2016, 2017, we really started to see that we were growing not just 20% a year, but we were growing like 75 to 100% a year in revenue. I kind of had a feeling of where it was going, and then we were opening up restaurants that were having success as well, and we always wanted to be more than just a catering business. We wanted to build a hospitality group with FoodDudes, which was really important to us. And then at that point, I had a business partner named Brent. You know, he came in right after my previous business partner and, you know, really helped develop the brand of FoodDudes, the logo, the website, our exotic wood platters. You know, he was like as futuristic as it came, you know, a serial entrepreneur and thinker and creator with really wild ideas.
He's still your partner now?
So he is in some of my other ventures, but in FoodDudes, he made a decision. He wanted to have a family and that this life wasn't for him anymore, and he was going to choose a different path. And at that point in 2018, we partnered with, we were very close to doing a deal with King Street Food Group, and we ended up partnering with Mike Kimmel and his family, who's a prominent family in Canada. And he has a company called Harlow, which has multiple restaurants in Toronto. And, you know, so we started working very closely with them, and they invested in the business. And it was really the first time for me where, like, I looked at my bank account personally, because I never took dividends to that point in time.
You were just getting a salary.
Correct. Where we had a deal in place that would get Brent out, and I would come down X amount in shares to make the deal work. And it was the first time that I looked at my bank account, and I was like, wow, like, this is like personally in my bank account. And this kind of was a moment for me to be like, all these years of hard work to get to this point. I should say, everyone thinks like, when you see 7 or 6 digits or whatever the number is go into your bank account, you think your life's going to change. I should mention that, like, the next day, the feeling wasn't anything of like, wow, my life's changed. I don't have to get up and work anymore, right? It was motivating me to want to have my new partners feel like they made a great investment in us. And the first thing he did was bring us Hotel X.
Wow.
And then COVID happened. And the way our deal was structured,
Shortly after your
partnership.
Well, after your sale, after you sold a portion of your shares, after that cash out, then COVID hit. And our partners couldn't have been more supportive to us during that time. And luckily, the NHL was doing a bubble, and they picked Hotel X to do it at. And if it wasn't for that, I'm not sure our business would have survived that first year of COVID. We went down 99.9% in revenue. Everybody in your industry did.
And we got crushed the most because we didn't cut our staff early enough, because we thought that it wasn't going to... What I should have done is, my payroll every 2 weeks is an insane number, and we didn't cut it soon enough. And all of our events canceled. So we were really in a tight position. And if it wasn't for that NHL bubble at Hotel X and my new partnership with my new partners, you know, I'm not sure where we would be without that.
You know, I felt so bad for your entire industry. And you and I didn't know each other when this was happening, by the way.
Crazy.
I felt so bad for your entire industry. I remember kind of in the height of COVID, in the beginning of COVID, when everybody was locked down, when Trump was still president, he made an announcement, and it just, like, my heart sunk when I heard it. And because he was so nonchalant the way he said it. Not like I'm not attacking Trump for saying it. It was factual. He was asked in a press conference what's going to happen to the restaurant industry. And he said, the restaurants will still be there. Everything will be fine. It just won't be the same owners anymore. So he was basically saying everyone's going out of business, and people with cash in that industry are going to come in and buy these assets for pennies on the dollar. And so so he's calming the American people down by saying restaurants will still be there. The restaurant industry is not going away. It's just basically everybody who's there now is going out of business and be replaced with other people. So when I heard that, and he was nonchalant about it, he was, you know, he's Trump, right? He's just like, it is what it is. But that made me feel like scared for your industry.
Big time. And for us, I mean, people would say, oh, like, you guys are on the top of hospitality, one of the, like, fastest growing companies in Canada, you know, what do you have to worry about? But I will say that, like, the more money you make, the more problems you have. So good luck calling 200 employees and telling them that they don't have a job. And then to, like, have it reopen back up and then shut back down. I mean, you know, the way that I'm grateful for all the support the Canadian government gave us. I should mention now we're all going to be paying that back for quite some time. But, you know, the way that the inconsistency, and I did an article with Toronto Life where they let me write my own editorial, basically, where I was just saying, like, how inconsistent the whole process was like, you're playing with people's lives here, right? You can open, no, you can't. You can only sit people outside.
That's a whole other,
you know, and like all those things really. So it was a really tough time for us, and luckily we had that contract to help us get through it. And I would say over the last couple of years, we've really just skyrocketed with our growth since COVID, and that moment you were asking me is like, I'm feeling that moment right now. When I look at the revenues, if I were to look back 5 years ago, you know, I'm in shock, to be honest with you, about how far we've came. And I really owe it to my team. I've had like, I would say probably like 20 employees that have been with me for over a decade. I owe it to all them, and I owe it to my business partners and to my family to keep pushing and going forward. But I have had a chance to do a lot of reflecting, and you know, it can all be taken from you. We learned that during COVID.
Yeah.
And you know, this time around, it's nice to see that we're finally doing the revenues for everyone to be more successful. And a lot of my staff want to have families and have their own aspirations and goals, and I'm lucky I'm able to give them raises and to give them bonuses and incentives, because at the end of the day, money talks.
Yes, yes. Speaking of family, I want to ask you something.
Of course.
You know, I'm a big proponent about entrepreneurs and everybody, for that matter, making the correct decision in terms of who their partner is on the personal side, their spouse. How important is it, like if you were to talk to, like, you know, younger Adrian, or young people in general, and when you see them kind of get into relationships, how would you advise them when it comes to, or what would you advise them when it comes to choosing your partner, like who you're going to build a life with, in terms of the importance to your overall success and well-being?
I would say choose wisely. I don't think there's a more important thing. And, you know, I speak to Alex about this all the time. I say, like, you know, I might be out here opening up all these businesses and growing the businesses and making all this money. There's like, that all fails in comparison to what she does on a day in and day out for our family. Because at the end of the day, my children and my family are everything to me, and their well-being. And, you know, the sacrifices that a partner has to make in order for, you know, the husband or the wife to explore their career path and their passion and their growth, to me, you can't put a price on. And, you know, life is a really like interesting thing. And at the end of the day, you don't know what the future holds. But what's most important, if you are going to start a family with someone, you better choose correctly, because, you know, that's for life. No matter what happens, right? Your life partners, your business partners at the end of the day.
Yeah,
and
even if you're not literally business partners, you're still business partners. You
are. And there's nothing more important than really making sure that you get that right. Because you'll go into business with lots of people, and you'll go through that honeymoon stage, and it will all sound great. And then you'll realize that you just don't see eye to eye on things, or you fall out of love with each other from a business standpoint.
So you're talking about business partners.
Yeah, correct. And, you know, I think it's really important that in a marriage that you pick the right partner, someone that's going to be, you know, a reliable, dependable, committed parent. And I've seen too many times, I mean, we've all seen, I mean, there's a reason why my brother and my dad are so successful as family law lawyers, right? Like the rates
Because they had support from their partners?
No, they're both divorce lawyers.
Oh, I see.
So I think that, like, what happens is like we don't choose correctly. And even if we don't choose correctly from a marriage standpoint, you know, make sure you have a partner that is going to be a great parent, because at the end of the day, you're signing up for a lifelong partnership, whether you want to or not. How
do you assess, like, so to your point, like, you know, your brother and your dad have these thriving businesses and splitting people up. I mean, they're already splitting up. They're
not to blame.
They're doing the mechanics of making sure everything gets done. What was my question? I guess, it's like, you know, I feel for me, I knew because I was already, I was 38 years old when I met Valeria. You were much younger than I was when you met Alex.
I was 27.
Yeah. So how did you know that this was going to be the person? Because I feel like I'm asking this question because, you know, the premise of the podcast is to understand how people become successful. And one of the common denominators that I see is that people have a solid relationship with their partner, or they don't have a partner at all.
Yeah.
It's one of the two.
Which
but
is
it's
also,
never,
I respect that actually. A lot of people that are able to build businesses and they don't have a partner that stands beside them. Like, to me, that takes a lot of guts and isn't easy. But like, at the end of the day, I think like how I knew, like I had just gotten out of a 5-year relationship, and we met, and you know, it just seems so organic and it just seems so natural. And when you get to meet their family and you get to really know them, like I should also say, like, don't rush. Like, the whole idea that you got to get married and you got to have kids, right? Now, I should say that, you know, we were basically inseparable for the first couple of years of our relationship. And we did have Shy before we even got married. We were engaged, but then we found out that Alex was pregnant. And it all happened pretty quickly. But, you know, it's the same as you and Valeria. You know when you know. You've told me. You're like, I'm going to marry this girl. And in fact, Alex and I felt the same way about each other from the first time we laid eyes on each other. And, you know, you just had that feeling. And, you know, we've gone through so much.
for sure.
Right.
Well, this move to Miami in the height of COVID, you just packing up your stuff, starting your business all over again here. How difficult is that? And is this very much like, I'm asking the question, I already know the answer. You know, the question is like, how much of a team effort is this between you and Alex to do this move, which I know is difficult because I've gone through and I'm still, you know, getting my bearings here. I know the answer because I see Alex, our kids go to the same school. And I see Alex. So I think Valeria probably works similar hours to you.
Right.
So I have less hours, so I'm with the kids more. So I actually see Alex at all like the parent and teacher events. So it's like all moms, you know, including Alex and me. Right. And I'm the dad. So I see her there. So I guess I'm answering my own question. Like it is a team effort. It's a collaborative effort to do like a heavy lift like this, like moving to another country, starting a business, getting your kids situated. Like it's not easy.
Yeah, like for me, the hardest thing is the travel. And on Mother's Day, I didn't have my visa yet. So
Right.
I had to wait. I didn't have a passport. So I couldn't be here on Mother's Day, which was heartbreaking. And, you know, Alex posted this really emotional video. And being a Pisces, I was just sobbing like a baby. And I was like, why am I crying and so overwhelmed with emotion? And I think for me, it was like, I'm missing out. Like a lot of those things she posted, I wasn't there for those moments.
Right.
And those events that you're talking about, that you're at, you know, I'm missing those moments. And
You're not, because I'm the only dad there. Don't worry about it. I don't think it's meant for like dads, but sure.
I know, but for me, it's like, it's so important. It's going to go by so quickly. You're a parent for the rest of your life, but like the first 20 years, you know, before that they go on and start their own lives, or even when they're 18 now, they're out of the house. And for me, it's like, there's nothing I'm more committed to than being a father and missing out on these moments and not providing Alex with the support that she needs, even though that I'm flying back and forth, working and providing or whatever it's called. I think that fails in comparison to what, like the burden that falls on most mothers. And I don't want to take away from the fathers that do it, but if we're being honest, it does fall mostly primarily on mothers.
Those are traditional gender roles in relationships.
Correct. Yeah. And I'm not saying that it's not the other way around, because it is. But it's something I don't take for granted, and it's something that makes me respect her even more than I already did as a person. And
this conversation, about partnership and family, I feel that this is probably the first interview, except Valeria, of course, that we talked a lot about this. And number one, it's because you and I are buddies outside of this podcast. But number two, I think that, you know, when talking about success and when talking about, you know, personal evolution and self-improvement and all of the things that kind of drive people forward, we don't, I think, as a society, talk enough about the partnerships and the relationships, the relationships with the kids, because if this breaks, if that family unit breaks, then all the other stuff breaks as well. And it's interesting because one of the observations that I've made throughout my life is that, and this is with like men, because I have friends who are men, the guys who are and this is more in the previous generation, but the guys who are more successful seem to have like this direct relationship with having broken homes. Like they fuck things up. You know what I mean? They're so invested in like chasing money and chasing career and business,
Right.
that their family breaks because they're not there enough. Like what would you say to people who are trying to, I guess, strike that balance once they have small kids and they're simultaneously building their family, building a business as an entrepreneur, as a type A personality, which you've proven yourself to be over the years. How do you make sure you're not under indexing on family and over indexing on the business side?
So around a year ago, and I feel comfortable saying this to you and the listeners, I got a therapist.
Okay.
And, something that my therapist and I talk about is that entrepreneurs are not meant to necessarily live a conventional domesticated life. And what I guess he was trying to get at with that is because we're so creative and because we're in our heads a lot and we're constantly thinking about how to, further and grow and build and create, it becomes challenging to live a plainer, more boring, in quotes, lifestyle. Particularly when the children are very little. I don't know about you, but I found it very hard to connect when they were babies. They were latched on to Alex's boobs.
Sure.
We breastfed for she breastfed for a long time.
You supervised.
Yeah, I did a lot of supervising. And, I think those early years were really challenging. And the only advice I can give to young fathers out there is that it does get easier and that connection with your children does build. And then once you have that connection and that friendship and bond with your children, it just becomes second nature to want to constantly be around them and in their presence. But out the gate, I wasn't connecting with Alex. I wasn't connecting with the two children. So all I did was just dive into my work and really focus on, okay, well, what can I do? Well, I might as well try to make us more money so we can have a bigger home and a nicer place to live and create, maybe private school for the kids and all these things. And I think it's just important to be patient and to realize that it does get easier with time. And that was a big lesson for me.
Okay. All right. In terms of, sorry, hold on. Give me a second here. In terms of your business, kind of what's next for your business, like how do you see things evolving? I mean, is it more than just scale? I know. Okay, so now, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, you've conquered Toronto. I mean, you're a household name in Toronto in food service. In Miami, you're just getting started, and it's funny because you and I talked about this probably even like 6 months to a year ago, and I said to you, I said, listen, like if you were able to do this in Toronto, where I feel demand is a fraction of what it is in this market in Miami, you're just going to blow up here. So is that kind of what the plan is? The plan is to obviously continue building Toronto, but I feel like in Toronto, I don't know how much more there is for you in Toronto in the sense of kind of once you're already at the top, you're at the top, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's still 10x left in Toronto. I don't know. I feel like you're everywhere in Toronto. But in Miami, you're still fairly new, even though you're probably doing like 10 to 20 events a week. So what's the plan? Is the plan to continue scaling in Miami now?
I mean, I should say I wish we were doing 10 or 20 events a week here.
I just feel you are, because every time I talk to you, you're doing an event.
This week we're busy, but it's been extremely humbling coming down to Miami and entering a new market and a new country where nobody really knows you. And luckily, I have a few clients that have really helped support us. But ultimately, where I see the business going, we're really at a pivotal moment for us in terms of, what to do next. We've kind of reached the ceiling in terms of what we don't ever want the quality or our experience to be sacrificed or diminished. So we're probably at that point where we want to stick to where we're at and we're comfortable, not too comfortable, but we feel that we can handle where we're at. We're looking at other markets now and not other opportunities.
Really? Other markets outside of Miami?
Yeah, like just, starting to consider getting into stadiums or, concert venues and doing larger things like that is something that really excites us. It can be quite lucrative that we feel we're ready to take on. But in Miami, you hit the nail on the head. The focus is to grow here, but we're not going to try to build a juggernaut like we did in Toronto. We have an idea of a revenue we would like to do on a year-to-year basis, but keeping it more boutique. And you know, I said a similar thing when I was growing FoodDudes in Toronto, and look what happened. But ultimately, at this point in my life, given that being a family man is really important to me, you know, I have to take that into consideration with what we're going to build down here. As you know, I am, you know, in my late 30s now, and not in my
Sorry,
late
are you
20s.
trying to imply that that's old?
I actually feel old, man.
Stop.
I just got a hair transplant. I got another one coming. You know, I'm getting there.
Yeah, no. I mean, look, if you think you're old, then I should just pack it in. This should be my last day of work, and I should just retire. No, you're definitely not old. I know sometimes it can feel that way when you have a lot of shit going on. I get tired sometimes in the middle of the day. I get tired, and I don't know why.
I get tired too.
I know, maybe because I'm up every day at 5 a.m. to go to the gym, but.
Yeah, you're like I wish I had that. I mean, that's the next thing I'm trying to start.
You should do that. Yeah. By the way,
but I have to be up till like 12 or 1 a.m. cooking sometimes.
That's the problem. Yeah, that's the problem. I go to bed at like 9:30 or 10. Yeah. So yeah, you can't do that, but you do have to work it into your schedule.
It's motivating to see, though, Gary. To be honest with you.
Well, thank you. No, I appreciate that. Yeah. But getting back to you for a second, and we're gonna kind of. Wrap things up shortly, but again, I want to understand the logic on the modesty. Is it because I mentioned it before, but I didn't really get an answer because I felt like you kind of alluded the question. Is this, like, for example, the fact that you catered like to Bill Clinton? Yeah. I mean, that seems pretty high profile, and you put it up on your Instagram, and that's how I know about it, but you didn't tell me about it. Like, you didn't tell me about it, and I'm your buddy. So is this like, I would think that would give you credibility, right?
For sure. You know, and I think that it's something that I'm really proud of, and getting to work for celebrities and get to meet, you know, people that have inspired me in my life is something that I'm proud of. I've always felt that, you know, being humble and, you know, staying in your lane and not being a loud talker are just characteristics that are important to me as a human being.
Yeah, but you're in contradiction because...
Let's hear it.
Well, you're in contradiction because, yes, that's your demeanor.
Yeah.
However, you haven't built what you've built by being quiet and not kind of breaking the rules a little bit and not pushing things forward. So, yeah, you're right. You're humble, but when I go to your event... You have, I call it kind of maybe POS. It's not point of sale, but maybe in your case, it's point of service, where you've got all of your signage, you've got your Instagram handle. It's all very strategic. So you do it when you need to do it. You do it when you feel it's going to give you a return. But I feel like you kind of shy away from it when it's on a personal basis. Like you put it on your Instagram. Probably wasn't even you. It was probably your social media manager knowing you. But I guess... Like, can you name some of like your big clients? I know there's the one celebrity who weren't, you know, it's confidential, even though I would love to say, but I'm not going to say because it is confidential. But like you mentioned Google earlier today, like who are some of your other like corporate clients, at least, that we can talk about?
Yeah, I mean, like all the big ones. So we work with Google, Instagram, Shopify, you know, I would say we're probably like, in terms of weddings, we're doing like 300 to 400 weddings a year. We've done tons of celebrity weddings.
Can you name some of the celebrities, or is it confidential?
Yeah, Deadmau5. I did a vegan wedding for Deadmau5 that was really cool, which was actually a lot of fun. And, you know, obviously cooking for Bill Clinton was super cool. But, you know, one thing I want to mention is, like, I posted, I would say a couple of weeks ago, I was speaking to my staff about, you know, a quote about reaching the top. And then my business partner, Lindsay, calls me after. She's like, do you think you should be mentioning that on Instagram? Like, isn't it kind of cocky and like kind of out of your personality to do that? You know, what will people think about it? And I said, you know, at the end of the day, the message I was trying to get across is not we're on top, look at us, we're so great. You know, do I think that there's event planners and other caterers out there that are for sure looking at us and being like, what can we do to take these guys down? I mean, that's healthy competition. I hope that's what they're talking about, because in my eyes, that's just like, I'm a sports guy, right? So like, I love the competition. I'm okay with that. At the end of the day, you know, why people keep using us and why event planners keep referring us and why venues keep suggesting us is because at the end of the day, no one is willing to put the work into an event that we are at FoodDudes. It just doesn't exist. So for me, I'm extremely humble as a person. And I don't feel the need to be the loudest person in the room or to make comments a lot of the time about where we're at and how successful we are, because I truly let our product speak for itself and I let the brand speak for itself. So yes, I'm loud with the brand, but I'm more quiet and self-reserved as a person.
And again, is that strategically or is that simply who you are? Or both?
I think it's just who I am. And if you were to ask people that know me well, you know, my friends, I'll obviously chirp with them behind closed doors, but I've kind of always been this way. And the minute I'm not like this, I'm sure my closest friends and family would check me right away.
No, look, it's fair enough. I got to say that before you and I met, and we met, I think it's going on 2 years now, where we actually met, I had only heard that you're a gentleman. So your reputation had preceded you, and when I met you, and I didn't know who you were, but when somebody said that's Adrian, that's the founder of FoodDudes, I was like, oh, that's Adrian. And it was actually after we sat down that first night, and I think we had like drinks or some snacks or something. It was like this weird festival thing. I don't know if you remember. We were there with the girls,
of course,
and we had met that night, and I didn't.
It was like a Cirque du Soleil performance.
Yeah. I don't know what it is in Miami, but everyone's like spinning from the ceiling. So there's all these performances. It has to do with like tying a rope to a rafter and then spinning off of it. But it was, I think, only halfway through the conversation with you that I was like, oh, this is Adrian. Okay, cool.
Right.
Adrian, listen, thanks a lot. I appreciate you allowing me to do this with you, knowing that, you know, this is my first shot at this. Not my first shot. You're my fifth interview, but I feel I'm getting better. Slowly.
Honestly, I mean, offline, I told Gary, I think that this podcast is going to blow up, and I'm honored to be on it. I'm so grateful whenever you repost something that we're doing and the support you've given me. Your guys' market share online is something like I mentioned to him before this. I'm like, I can't believe I got these many views. He's like, well, we reposted it. But at the end of the day, I think the podcast is going to be super successful. I look forward to watching more of them, and I'm just grateful to be on. So thanks for having me.
Thank you. And on a final note, I just want to do one thing. You and I have been talking about this. Can we please arrange some kind of a small event, either at my home once my home's in order, or anywhere for that matter, where you come in with whoever you want, like in terms of helping you out from FoodDudes, and let's create something, and let's create a vlog and a bunch of like short form content, and let's push it out through my Instagram, through Valeria's Instagram, because I want to help as much as I can. And I think in general, entrepreneurs should be helping each other as much as they can, and especially when they're friends.
I mean, I thought you were going to challenge me to an arm wrestle, but you know, and I'm not going to accept that challenge. But yeah, I would love to get together and cook something special and do something for you and Valeria. I mean, you guys have supported us forever, so it'd be a pleasure.
Let's do it. Thanks,
thanks,
man.
brother.
I appreciate it. Thank you.